So today I thought I would try a video to remind myself. I went to my first crank-in. I had a blast. If you've never been to a crank-in with your CSM, you've got to try it. Um, so the thing I have is I'm one of these people that I don't like going into new situations that I don't know exactly what to expect and exactly how to prepare for it. Like packing for a vacation that I'm not sure what to expect is an absolute nightmare, right? Because I've got contingency plans and then I have contingency plans for my contingency plans, and it's exhausting. So I remember contacting the organizer of the crank-in to ask some questions because I'd never been to the location, I'd never been to a crank-in. What do you bring? What do you not bring? In the situation that I was in for my crank-in, the location was an hour and a half away, so it's not like, oh, if I forget something, I could just pop back home and get it, and it's not a big deal. I would have had to do without it. Now, the nice thing is that when you're with crafters, usually a bunch of people will have a bunch of extra stuff that they can lend you and so forth, but you never want to really bank on that. So, what were some things that I found really helpful at the crank-in? And I can't promise that every crank-in is like this because I've only been to one, so I'm certainly not an expert. And I don't think that the crank-in that I went to was a huge crank-in. There were about, I think, 15, 20 people. I had, it didn't matter the size to me. I still had a fantastic time. But I do know, like, for example, there's the Great Canadian Crank-in, I believe. I think it's in June in Ingersoll, I believe it is, Ontario, which for me is several hours away. So that would include the price of a hotel on top of everything else. So maybe when I'm retired, I'll go to something like that. But right now, I'm just trying to stay, close to my local area that I can drive there and back, like, within a day and not have to add a cost of a hotel on top of that. So I thought I'd go through and just chat really quickly about the things that you want to remember when you're going to a crank-in, and you may find you need to add other things along the way as well. So you will notice me looking down because, of course, with my memory, I need a list. Obviously, you want to bring your CSM, and all the pieces that go along with it. So that could be, your buckle, for example, your weights. You want to bring all of the tools that you would need, right? Like your latch hook tool. I've got one that's kind of just a regular hook that I use as well. You want to find out about the location. So what's the day going to be like? Are you going to have, like in our case, we had a catered lunch. It was a cost to go to the CSM, which I didn't have a problem with. It was very reasonable. But it was a catered lunch, so I didn't have to worry about bringing food. I did bring a water bottle in case I got thirsty throughout the day, and I brought a little, granola bar just in case I was hungry before, the food or something like that. If you're a person that's like, needs medication throughout the day, obviously you want to remember bringing your medication and so forth. But you've got to remember that depending on the location, you've got to carry all that stuff in the car to wherever you are. And so I knew that the building it was a community center that we were in, and we were on the second floor. And thankfully we had an elevator, so it wasn't too bad. But I didn't want to be making multiple, 10, 15 trips or something like that. One or two was, what I wanted to do. So I was asking, what is it that's there? Like, for example, I have a little stool that I use with my CSM, but it has no back. So at some point I might be tired. I want to take a rest. What would be, do they have any actual chairs just to sit and rest, for example, if I need a break? In my scenario, there was, so I didn't have to bring an extra chair with a back, like one of those, like lawn chairs or something like that. They did have tables that were provided, but the tables were for eating lunch, and they weren't going to work. I was told they were not going to work for using a CSM, the types of tables that were there. So I thought, okay, that's fine because I have my own little tiny table that I have at home. It's a work-made bench or something like that I use at home, which is nice and foldable. It's easy to carry, and so that was fine. I had that. Other things that I was told to consider to bring my ribber if I want, and I hadn't used my ribber up until that point, and I thought, well, maybe I will, and it was great because I was able to actually do that. I use stitch markers, for example, so I brought those. Obviously, your needles for your CSM, you want to bring extra needles in case anything breaks. Your cones of yarn that you want to use to make your socks or whatever it is that you're making. You want to bring your waste yarn as well. If you use ravel cord, you want to bring your ravel cord with you. You want to ask about the light situation, right? Do you need to bring your own light? So I did bring a little desk light with me because it had been mentioned in the list of things. And I didn't end up needing it actually because the community lights overhead were more than sufficient. It wasn't something I actually needed. I was told to bring cash, so we're going to be some vendors there, which was nice. I did end up picking up a couple of things. So you want to ask whether or not there's, I don't know if all crank-ins have vendors, but it's definitely something to ask. I tend to be very organized, so I have my little binder instructions, how to do the Kitchener stitch and how to do a toe and these kind of things, step-by-step instructions for myself that I use at home. And I have one of these, what do you call them? It's a stand that you put your paper on, basically, and so I have that always on my workbench, so I can just, step 1, do this, step 2, do this, and follow along and not miss any of the steps. So I brought that as well, so that I'm not constantly trying to, look over and on a paper that's flat on a desk, it's not easy to see when you're trying to do something. In terms of my tools, I talked to you, bringing your latch hook, for example. I brought my sweet spot, my weights, my buckle, my crescent for lifting up the needles, my sock bonnet, the little hook, I don't know what you call that, but the little hook implement that people use. There was also, I needed to have some sort of method in terms of bringing my stuff, right? So I ended up putting all the stuff into 2 bins. So I had one with my CSM and a bunch of the components in it. I had put some towels to make sure that things were kind of cushioned, there was no chance of damage. And then there was a second one that had my yarn and some other little things. And so I could have just carried, each bucket in if I wanted to, but what I ended up doing, and I had also my bench that I had to bring in. So I'm lucky because I had a little trolley that I bought. It's kind of like a little luggage trolley, so I was able to put the 2 Rubbermaid bins on the trolley, bring that in the first, and then go back and get my bench and then bring that in the second round. So that worked well for me. So I definitely liked that. I also, the other thing was to bring was pattern information if you wanted to make socks. Was there a certain pattern to the socks? I'm not quite there yet. I'm still in the very basic socks of just using simple colors the way they happen to work out. But the pattern information, in other videos I've mentioned that I use a computer program that says, okay, I need this many rows, for my cuff, and this many rows for my leg, and this many rows, and so forth. So that day, I had anticipated making a pair of socks for myself and a pair of socks for my husband. So I brought the pattern information that I needed of how many rows for each section. I also brought tension information because, and this you had to do ahead of time, like the pattern, you obviously need to prepare ahead of time if you haven't done it before. The tension tubes, you need to do that ahead of time as well because I wanted to use new yarns I hadn't tried before. So I basically, made the tension swatch days before, counted out my tension, how many, stitches per row or per, row going up or going across, so that if I wanted to make a pattern while I was there, I could do that. So clearly, my idea of what I wanted to get done at a crank-in was extremely ambitious. I don't know if it was just me, but I have no qualms. I'm absolutely wanting to go next year to the crank-in, but I didn't get a lot done. I was actually really, really surprised I did not get a lot done. They had a whole bunch of demos throughout the day of different things to try out, and I loved that because, you get to not only, be around people who are enjoying the thing you're enjoying, but you get to learn new skills. You get to ask people new skills. I asked actually some people that I've met in Ottawa for the CSM, they were there, and I'm like, hey, if you have a moment, could you show me how to use the river? And so yeah, we had some time to do that, so I practiced that. So I got one sock done, not one pair, one sock. I still have to do the other sock, but that was a really cool thing as well. We also got goodie bags, small goodie bags with little things to try, like to, for as part of CSM for newbies like myself. So I really appreciated that as well. So I'm really lucky that the people in my area are extremely friendly and helpful and generous and all that. And I can't imagine that they're not like that everywhere else. But I would definitely, if you haven't been to a crank-in, definitely do that. I would love to organize something closer to home. If you want to do that yourself, again, I'm not a huge expert on organizing things, but you'd want to find out how many people are interested because you obviously need a community space for people to, to be around, you need obviously something, the bathrooms, you have to have, if it's going to be a full day event, you need obviously to consider like food arrangements. Are people bringing their own food? Are, you providing food and stuff like that? So, and then how are people getting, to your location if you're the one that wants to actually organize a crank-in? How are they getting to that location, right? If everybody needs to get a hotel or something like that, you may obviously not have as many people coming along. I know that actually several people, because it was an hour and a half, some people actually in the group came from where I was coming from, and they just happened to sleep the night before at the location, because it was like, I think 9 to 4. So I left at like 7 o'clock in the morning to drive there, but people were already there. They were already set up and having a great time by the time I got there, even though it was like 9 o'clock when I got there. But they weren't tired from driving an hour and a half to get there. So I mean, there's various considerations that to look into at that point. But again, I would strongly suggest it. These are things that I brought that I found extremely helpful, and I hope that helps. And let me know how your first crank-in goes, because I had a blast. Have yourself a great day.